Årvaralda, that arar gullo, hnigo heilog votten av himinfjollom, då hafti helga in hugom stora, Borghilder borit I brå lundi. In the earliest ages, when the eagles hawked, then sacred water ran down the heavenly mountains. There had the Holy One, of great intent, been born by fortress battle in the grove of bright shine. Hello, and welcome back to my reading from my book, The Seed of Yggdrasill. We have now reached chapter 12.5, The Wind Eagle of Yggdrasill. And this chapter is based on a lecture I did back in 2011 or something, in the Hidden Knowledge in Old Norse Myths series, video number 28, The Source of Awareness and the Fire from Within. So I'm gonna read that one. We are now closing in towards the end of this book. We are in the last chapter, chapter 12, The One and the Many, Pantheism and Mysteries in Old Norse Mythology. So, let's read. I have on occasion pointed out that I believe that the Poetic Edda is a testimony to a spiritual tradition which ultimately transcends the borders of culture. Norse mythology is by all means obviously strongly flavoured by Viking Age culture, which is why I sometimes talk about Old Norse culture and history as such, as a means to understand the cultural and historical background to their mythology. The imagery, the symbols and the metaphors applied by Norse poets when retelling the old myths are without a doubt rooted in the realities, the often harsh cultural realities of Old Norse culture. Yet, the imagery, the symbols and the metaphors applied also reveal deeper spiritual messages which appear to be more universal than cultural. Some of these messages are very subtle indeed, and may have been recognizable perhaps only to those who were initiated into the mysteries of Seiðr, Galdrar, poetry, skaldskap, runes and precious mead, Märamjöður. I could well argue that what I just said is the case based on proper academic research. I am not the only one who has discovered that hidden meanings in the myths are a fact that even corresponds perfectly with the rules of Old Norse skaldskap, the making of poetry. There is really no doubt that the Norse poets tried to convey deeper meanings through metaphors. But what are those deeper meanings? Some would try to take the approach of Carl Gustav Jung, who believed in mythical archetypes and a sort of common archetypal mind shared by all humans. I would take it a lot further than to the world of archetypes, though. I have sometimes pointed out similarities to old Indian traditions and to classical mystery cults, religious or spiritual paths that were concerned with spiritual transformation and illumination through union with the divine. Today I am going to make comparisons to a tradition of knowledge which at first sight seems very different. As I discovered for myself, what I am now convinced of is the nature of these hidden meanings in Norse myths. Well, as I discovered this, I came to personally believe that these deeper messages, the messages that are hidden behind the culture-specific imagery, belong to an age-old an almost pan-human tradition of spiritual transformation. I want to point out here that to say something like that, what I just said, is often thought of as controversial. Furthermore, the lines between the two cultures that I am going to draw next are sometimes based on my personal convictions, and all of them may not be scientifically proven. One of the reasons I point this caution out is that I am going to refer to a source that is very controversial seen from an academic point of view. So please be aware that the connections I am going to make between the source and Norse myths are strictly a matter of personal opinion and personal experience. So, to sum it up, this is my slightly controversial standpoint. There are some universal messages in the Edda, deep insights that transcend the borders of culture, insights found in countless cultures that to all appearances have nothing to do with each other. I believe that these deeper insights belong not to any particular culture or tradition, but that they belong to humankind, perhaps reaching back into a lost prehistory, or perhaps even testifying to some ultimate truths that have been perceived by different peoples at different times. From this point of view, the Poetic Edda is one culture's testimony to a very ancient lore of knowledge, almost forgotten in the Western world after centuries of suppression. Sometimes the universal messages cannot be easily traced back to any known historical cultural connections. I'm going to take a swift ride to a culture that apparently has never had any connection with Viking Age culture whatsoever, namely pre-conquest Mexico, in order to point out just one such amazing conceptual parallel. So I'm going to refer to a very controversial source here, so please bear with me and listen to what I actually say before you judge that source based on perhaps what other people said, or perhaps because the books were too difficult to read or something. Just a moment. I am referring to the books of Carlos Castaneda. So, The Art of Dreaming, A Separate Reality, The Fire from Within. I have more. I think I have all his books. Because I read these when I was in my early 20s, and they were the first books ever to actually describe something that I had experienced several times at different occasions. Mysterious things that I could find nothing that actually could explain it. Not in mythology, not in, not in any books about, not in any New Age books that I tried to figure out. They had these books are very particular, and when you read them, they can also prompt something in the mind, and I think that's they really do challenge your perception of reality. And I know that many people don't think that Carlos Castaneda actually represents a particular culture in Mexico. I lived in Mexico for 4 years, and I had some very interesting encounters that made me think that, maybe Carlos Castaneda did experience exactly what he writes about. And whatever the truth is behind this, he does actually describe a particular way of perceiving reality that is, I think, almost forgotten, but which does exist as a potential in human beings. And I explored those potentials when I was in my 20s. And as said, his books were absolutely the only books that actually did describe and explain what I had experienced. So that's why I like these books. They gave me a language for what I experienced, and as said, I could find nothing else that could describe exactly that. Until I started to dig into Old Norse myths and started to recognize things. So this is why I do refer to this one. And there are some, Anyway. So I am going to read to you a passage from a book called The Fire from Within by Carlos Castañeda. For those of you who have not heard about Castañeda, he was a social anthropologist who, from the 1960s onwards, became apprenticed to a Yaqui Indian, as they call it, and native Mexican sorcerer, brujo, called Don Juan in Mexico. The sorcerer, the brujo, Don Juan, instructed Castañeda on a number of issues that have to do with human perception of the great mystery that is the world. The books are very recommendable, I think, because they are very thought-provoking and mind-altering. They should also be read with great sobriety, because I have met some very self-important guys who have become totally delusional after reading these books. They think that they are seers and masters and sorcerers just because they have read these books and had a couple of visions. I've also read these books and I have had a lot of visions or weird experiences, and I still don't think I am a master or a brujo or bruja like that, and I think that's it's quite important to stay a bit grounded and to stay a bit humble and not to give in to the self-important need for for classifying yourself as a certain title, just because you have had a peek into the great mystery. Now, however, for those who are more grounded and humble and have a bit of self-insight to start with, these books can hold only great interest. They are also highly controversial from an academic point of view. Castañeda has been criticized for not really revealing the real identity of his source, Don Juan, that is, and for not attaching the teachings of Don Juan to any known contemporary culture. He has even been accused of having made the whole thing up. After having lived in Mexico for several years myself and experienced a thing or two in my life as a whole, I am personally convinced that his books are based on actual experience and that the teachings of Don Juan does not represent a particular culture but does represent an ancient pan-human art of seeing, exactly as Don Juan himself, according to Castañeda, actually did claim. He did claim that he did not represent a particular culture, but that he represented a very, very old pan-human, that is, a universally human art of seeing. Don Juan often spoke of the heritage of knowledge provided by what he called the old seers. The old seers that he referred to were apparently sorcerers living in Mexico at some point before the European conquest. Don Juan never specified who they were or what culture they belonged to, although he named them Toltecs. It is believed that the Toltecs, as a archaeological, historical culture, they were a pre-Aztec culture and they were very warlike. But Don Juan claimed that the name was not used to describe a culture, but to describe the old seers and their art of seeing. What some of these old seers witnessed about the greater cosmos, the part of the cosmos that is inaccessible to ordinary human perception, but which could be glimpsed by trained seers who were accustomed to altering their perception. When the terms to see and seeing are used in this context, Castaneda is referred to an art of perceiving the invisible, which has nothing to do with looking at things. It has rather to do with seeing realities that are hidden behind the apparent one. You get why I like this. So I'm going to read from, apparently it's this book, The Fire from Within. I do not recommend that as a starting book if you're going to read Castaneda. It's probably better that you start with a separate reality or the teachings of Don Juan or something like that, if you want to read them. As said, they are quite mind-blowing and hard to grasp. Now, I read from The Fire from Within. Don Juan said that the old seers, risking untold dangers, actually saw the indescribable force which is the source of all sentient beings. They called it the eagle because in the few glimpses that they could sustain, they could only sustain these seeings in a few glimpses. So in the few glimpses that they could sustain, they saw the eagle as something that resembled a black and white eagle of infinite size. They saw that it is the eagle who bestows awareness. The eagle creates sentient beings so that they will live and enrich the awareness it gives them with life. So the eagle gives awareness to sentient beings. They also saw that it is the eagle who devours the same enriched awareness after making sentient beings relinquish it at the moment of death. So, we are speaking of something only perceived by proper brujos, seers, who were risking untold dangers when they saw the indescribable force which is the source of all sentient beings, the source of universal consciousness. And they called it the eagle, because in the few glimpses that they could sustain, they saw it as something that resembled an eagle of infinite size, a black and white eagle even. And they saw that this eagle bestows awareness to sentient life. The eagle creates sentient beings so that they will live and enrich the awareness that the eagle gives them with life. And the seers also saw that it is the eagle who devours, in the end, the same enriched awareness after making sentient beings relinquish it at the moment of death. So, I'm just going to sum that up. I read it twice now just to make it clear because it's a bit difficult. So basically the idea, what they saw, was that at the source of the universe itself, there was a being, a source of the awareness that we as sentient life carry. It gives us this awareness. It is the source of our awareness, our sentient being awareness. And when we die, that awareness comes back to the eagle. And I'm going to continue. For the old seers, Don Juan went on, to say that the reason for existence is to enhance awareness is not a matter of faith or of deduction. They saw it. So the reason for existence that they saw is to enhance awareness in the universe as a whole. They saw that the awareness of sentient beings flies away at the moment of death and floats like a luminous cotton puff right into the eagle's beak to be consumed. So when we die, our awareness is consumed into the beak of the eagle, at the source of awareness. For the old seers, that was the evidence that sentient beings live only to enrich the awareness that is the eagle's food. So our awareness is the food of this source. We feed it with our awareness, with our experience when we die. So the eagle is as real for the seers as gravity and time is for you, and just as abstract and incomprehensible as gravity and time. Now from this, Don Juan went on to explain that the eagle transmits so-called emanations of awareness, and he explained the emanations in this way. The eagle's emanations are an immutable thing in itself, which engulfs everything that exists, the knowable and the unknowable. There is no way to describe in words what the eagle's emanations are. They must be witnessed by the seer. They are a presence, almost a mass of sorts, a pressure that creates a dazzling sensation. One can catch only a glimpse of them, as one can catch only a glimpse of the eagle itself. It goes without saying that the eagle is the source of the emanations. So emanations, basically he is talking about a force like as sort of incomprehensible and unseen, but still as real as gravity and time. These emanations emanating from this big eagle, the so-called eagle, the source of awareness. And these emanations go through the entire world, and they influence how we perceive, how we think, what we do. It is a part of all existence, all life, and all sentient life. So, to sum it up in my own words, the seers of Old Mexico, according to the sorcerer Don Juan, and as rendered by Castañeda, they perceived a central cosmic source of awareness. Awareness runs through the universe at large in the form of so-called emanations coming out of this central source. As sentient beings, we all relate to these emanations. Our awareness is shaped by these emanations, and we are, again, in turn, shaped by our awareness, by how and what we perceive and what we do not perceive, of course. The gigantic source of the mysterious cosmic emanations of awareness was called the eagle, not because it was actually an eagle, but because it appeared to resemble an eagle to the seers. And just as this so-called eagle bestows awareness through its emanations, so it also feeds on our awareness when we die. So now, I'm not going to discuss the truth value of this claim about the cosmic metaphorical eagle. What I'm going to say is that I believe that a very similar concept had an important and even a central place in Old Norse mythology. We are speaking of the great giant eagle, actually the great giant in eagle disguise, that frequently shows up in Old Norse sources. It appears in the Prose Edda, it appears in the Poetic Edda, several poems, and it appears in a 9th century skaldic poem known as Haustlögn, and it appears in numerous fornaldarsögur, that is, the sagas of olden times, which carry a lot of mythical and folklore material. This is the eagle of Norse myths. The oldest Norse description we have of the eagle is actually found in the skaldic poem Hyndluljóð, which was created by the poet Tjodolfr of Vanir, who was a skald, a bard, at the court of the Norwegian king Haraldur Hårfagri from the 870s and until the 930s. The poem dates back to about around the year 899 or 900 AD. So it's at least 1100 years old. And it is rendered and explained by Snorri in the Prose Edda too. And it relates the story of how the goddess Idun was abducted by the giant eagle called Thjazi. I have written a really interesting, if I may say so myself, article about that poem and its mythology. Actually, I read this here, but by now I have a three-part, altogether 6-hour lecture series on my Patreon about the goddess Idun and the myth about her and the different sources about her, the Hyndluljóð included, and it's also become a book by yours truly, The Goddess Idun in Poetry and Myth. You can find it as a lecture series here on Patreon, both video and audio, and you can perhaps buy the book or read the book or gift it to someone. Whatever it is, I have already discussed this poem, the Hyndluljóð. So, yeah. For now, we shall only have a look at the giant eagle, Thjazi. So the first question, as always in my research, is what does the name Thjazi mean? It is derived, perhaps, from the Old Norse word tjatsa, which means to enslave, to bind, to capture. So I translated the name Thjazi to mean the slave binder. What keeps you? Take it. This is in itself an interesting name when compared to how Don Juan proceeds to describe the cosmic force known metaphorically as the eagle in his Mexican tradition. For he emphasizes how we are all literally slave-bound to this force. Our awareness stems from it and returns to it in death. Both Tjodolf and later Snorri describes the slave binder as a being of enormous size, exactly as the Mexican Castañeda eagle is said to be of infinite size. There are many other names for this eagle in Tjodolf's poem. As always in Norse poetry, one character appears with countless names that describe its function. So one of the other names for Thjazi is Valkastar. Val, that refers to the dead, basically, and more specifically to the chosen dead who come to Valhall. And kasta means to throw something. So that the name of this eagle, the slave-binding eagle, could also be translated as the death thrower, the one who throws the dead, or the one who throws death, or the one who throws actually corpses. So, and this links the Norse eagle to death, of course. Other names that associate Thjazi with death describe him as the ghost of the giant world, and he is said to be very hungry. And he's also the vulture, that is the one who eats the dead, the vulture of the flock. He's the one who consumes the dead. And it's also called the seagull of entrails, because he will, of course, also consume the entrails. So within Norse poetry, Snorri explained that all masculine birds, such as the seagull, can be used in poetry and myth to replace the concept of the eagle. So that would include the raven, the rooster, and the vulture as birds that could all be used to describe this great cosmic eagle. So we have a slave binding force in the poem strongly associated with death. Tjazi is also described as flapping his wings so that he creates something called arnsug, which means eagle suction. And you know arnsug, eagle suction, is a known poetical, Old Norse poetical metaphor for wind and whistling wind. So he creates wind. So Tjazi is described as flapping his wings and then creating eagle suction, which is supposedly whistling winds. And he is also said to be seated in the top of an age-old tree. He's also not an eagle, he's a giant, a jötun, a consumer, because jötun comes from the word to eta. It's related to eta, which means to consume, to eat. So he's a jötun, a giant in eagle hide. He just looks like an eagle, but he's not really an eagle, as in the bird. He's a cosmic force. Just like in Castaneda. And now, these aspects of Tjazi links him with another eagle figure described by Snorri in the Gylfaginning, the prose Edda, where we hear that there is a giant in eagle disguise who sits by the end of heaven in the top of the world tree. And from his flapping wings come the wind across all the people and through all the worlds. And his name, interestingly, is Svelgr, a name that literally and without doubt translates as corpse swallower. So he swallows the dead. And this giant in eagle disguise is also described in the Edda poem Vafthrudnismål, that is the speech of the great head veil, or the powerful head veil. The Vaf, it refers to a head veil that women often used when they were married. They used a sort of veil. It was like a bit like a hijab for married women in the Viking Age. It was common. It was, I don't think it was mandatory, but it was common to use a veil to signalize that you were actually married. And that is the word of the Vaf. That is such a head veil. And Thrudnir means powerful. So this is a eagle that creates grand illusions, by the way, for the gods. And he is called the powerful head veil. This Vafthrudnir, the powerful head veil, reveals something about this giant in eagle disguise. He reveals it when Odin is engaging the giant Vafthrudnir to a contest of wisdom. The god asks, Odin asks, and this is from stanza 36 and 37 in the said poem. Seiðr datt id 9:, allt fick svinnan kväda, och du, Vafthrudnir, viter. Vadan vinderum kommer, så att förvåg yfer. Tell me the 9th question. So they have been, this is the 9th question. As they say you are wise, and if you, Vafthrudnir, know it, from where comes the wind that moves across the waves? And Vafthrudnir, the powerful head veil, replies, Svelgr heiter, Seiðr av himins enda, jötun I Arnarhamr. Av hans vängjum kväda vind koma, alla män ether. His name is Corpse Swallower, sitting by the end of heaven, a giant in eagle's disguise, Jötun I Arnarham. And from his wings it is said that the wind comes across all human beings. So the wind comes across all human beings, but in the question it is actually talked about a wind that moves across the waves. So, whereas the Edda reveals that this eagle sits at the end of the world, Snorri said that he sits in the top of the world tree and to the north. In Norse cosmology, Hel, the realm of death, is situated to the north. And just as the eagle swallows the dead, so Hel is the place to which all the dead return, although it is also the place from which everything began. In the Norse creation, misty Hel is a place that existed before time itself, and from which both the world giant and the first Æsir gods emerged from. It is the source. And the name Corpse Swallower, well, it's pretty unambiguous. It reveals that this giant in eagle disguise devours the dead. The imagery is, in my opinion, completely consistent with the Mexican idea of the gigantic eagle-like figure which devours the awareness of the dead. That the corpse swallower is identical to the slave binder is clear through their descriptions, as well as the fact that they are both associated with an age-old tree, in which top they are seated. The tree is the world tree, a metaphor for the universe itself. Like the Mexican eagle, they sit at the very beginning and end of the universe. The Mexican eagle emanates awareness, which is compared to an unseen presence, like a pressure which rules us, but nevertheless is invisible to ordinary human perception. The fact that this awareness takes the form of emanations indicates a kind of streaming movement originating in the cosmic source, creating the world and the awareness of living beings. Now, in the Old Norse myths, these emanations, I think, are called winds that move across the waves. Winds which move through or across so-called waves. That is, I believe, the same as vibrations. Sound vibrations. So is it possible to compare the Mexican cosmic emanations that we find in Castaneda's work with the Norse cosmic winds? Well, both the emanations and the winds stem from a gigantic cosmic force which is described as looking like an eagle, but not quite being an eagle, and which devours the dead. So this is also in the Norse myths. We are talking about an eagle, which is not really an eagle. It's a jötun, a mysterious, powerful, consuming, universal cosmic force, which looks like an eagle, which carries the hide of an eagle, but it's not really an eagle. It is a cosmic force, and it devours the dead. It's just the same as the one Castaneda describes. Another similarity is the fact that both the emanations and the winds are associated with awareness. Yes, winds and mind or awareness are very much connected in Norse poetry. As Snorri said, consciousness, awareness, is called the wind of the giantesses. I rest my case. Well, not entirely. I am going to continue. Don Juan made it clear to Castañeda that the eagle was a metaphor, a way of describing the indescribable. The Norse myths also reveal that the eagle shape is a disguise, a hammer, a hide for a jötun, a giant. The image of the eagle appears in other places in Edda lore too. As a giant eagle, it turns up in the poem of Helgi Hjörvardsson, where it guards two maidens in a land of fire and sleep. Yes, that land is actually called Svovaland, which means the land of falling asleep. The maidens of the land of falling asleep, the so-called maidens, can only be brought out of this sleeping realm, only be brought out if the eagle is metaphorically killed. So this eagle is continuously killed and then it reappears. So it's not actually killed, it's more like that someone conquers the power of death. That is what the killing of the eagle means. So there are associations to fire and flames in the realm of the eagle, a theme we shall return to. Another giant in eagle disguise is Suttungr, whose name means heavy with drink, from sut, drink, and tungr, heavy. He is the father of the maiden who guards the precious drink of poetry, and the one who allowed Odin to have both the maiden and the drink, although not without a price. There is also fire involved, but again, we shall return to that later. So, to get hung up on the eagle will not take us all the way. The eagle is but a metaphor for something different, something mysterious and enormous that can only be described through metaphor. We shall look at other possible ways of describing this cosmic force. And I cannot stress enough how important it is to realize that the Old Norse poets would use numerous ways of describing the same essential thing through applying metaphors. The descriptive variations are countless, but the essential theme at the bottom of it are actually quite few, and they are concentrated. In order to identify the essential theme here, we have to look past the imagery, such as the image of the eagle, and into the essential meaning. As I see it, the essential meaning is that there is a cosmic source to all awareness, which is also the same as the source of death, a point of origin to which all awareness comes from and to which all awareness returns, as if drawn back by unseen movements. These movements are like winds emanating from the original source, permeating all existence with awareness and drawing awareness back into itself. Like a cosmic well where all the intelligence and memories and tidings of the universe are contained. So where in Norse mythology can we find symbolic, metaphorical imagery which seems to be describing the same essential theme here of a cosmic source and a cosmic end? Well, the eagle is so clearly an image of the realm of death that another description of this realm is the most obvious place to begin. And Hel, misty Hel, is the most obvious description of the realm of death that we find in the Edda. Within misty Hel, there is a well, or let us say a water source, a metaphorical water source, of course. This is the well into which the dead are thrown in order to be consumed by serpents. The well of Hel is called the Værgelmir, which could translate as the bellower mill or the bellower cauldron, but also Gelmir can be used, the bellower can be used to describe, guess what, an eagle. The word ver may mean either mill, where substance is ground into tiny particles, or it can mean a cauldron where things are being cooked up. The word Gelmir, which I have translated as the bellower, or the resounding one, could, according to some old dictionaries, actually mean a young eagle. Then we would be speaking of a well in Hel called the Eagle Mill or the Eagle Cauldron. However, it may just as well likely mean the bellower. Okay, I have a cat outside here who is trying to get in through the window. Just a moment. Yeah, the pussy. Let's see if she will let me read. Where was I? Let's see. I lost the place. Ja, din skurk, jeg mistet hvor jeg var. Just a moment. Yeah. So, I'll just start reading here. The eagle is so clearly an image of the realm of death that another description of this realm is the most obvious place to begin. And Hel, Misty Hel, is the most obvious description of the realm of death that we find in the Edda. Within Misty Hel there is a well, or let us say a water source. This is the well into which the dead are thrown in order to be consumed by serpents. The well of Hel is called the Værgelmir, which could translate as the bellower or bellowing or resounding mill or cauldron. The word ver may mean either mill, where substance is ground into tiny particles, or a cauldron where things are being cooked up. The word gelmir, which I have translated as bellower, could, according to some old dictionaries, actually mean a young eagle. Come here, Debbie. I'm sorry. So anyway, the word gelmir, which I have translated as bellower or resounder, could, according to some old dictionaries, actually mean a young eagle. Then we would be speaking of a well in Hel, in death, called the Eagle Mill or the Eagle Cauldron. However, it may just as likely mean the bellower, the bellowing mill, or the resounding mill, or the eagle mill. Now, the bellowing theme is typical of the underworld. They have the Jallarbru, for example, which means the bellowing or the resounding bridge, which is the bridge between the world of the living and the world of the dead. The river that this bellowing bridge is crossing, that is, the river that forms the border between life and death, is simply called Jöll, which means the bellower. In the first video I made in this series, I explained how the name of the world giant Ymir is derived from the Old Norse word Ymir, which means sound. When Ymir is slain and his body is used to shape the universe, this is a metaphor for how the original unifying sound was separated into many different tunes, giving us the message that the universe is created by an orchestra of tunes, of sounds, which are also in the myths associated with waves and streams. I take it that sound vibrations were perceived as essential to the creation of the cosmos, and that the idea... the cat is... that the idea is that these sound vibrations originated as one great sound source. So here we have Ymir, the original sound, becoming the material for the creation of the universe through the separation of original sound or voice into countless tunes. But Ymir is not alone. he was nurtured by the cosmic cow, Audhumla, abundant brew ingredient, in fact by the rivers of so-called milk that ran from her teats. Enter the rivers and the streams. As a parallel, we see the well of Hel, which is obviously related to sounds, and from which it is said all rivers stem. All the rivers of the world stem. And these rivers, they come out of the well in death, and they create the borders between the worlds. In the Edda poem Grimnismal, we learn that all the rivers in the world are derived from the bellower cauldron or bellower mill of Hel, the eagle's mill. So what are these cosmic rivers really, if not another way of saying emanations, a streaming movement? Moreover, the so-called rivers get the... I had to... she was making sabotage here, so I had to take her out. Not get her to go outside, of course. So again, let's go back. What are these cosmic rivers really, if not another way of saying emanations, a streaming movement? Moreover, the so-called rivers get their so-called water from a very interesting source. Apparently, a stag stands at the roof of Valhöll and eats from the world tree. That is, we are speaking of a force which devours the universe itself. And from this nourishment, water drips down into the well of Hel and becomes the rivers that run through the world. So again, we are speaking of a cosmic source of origin which continually emanates all movements of the universe and which continually feeds on the experience of the universe itself. Into the well of Hel, the dead go, just as in one image they are devoured by the eagle. They are devoured in Hel's well by serpents and wolves. The rivers of the world, the movement of the world, flow out from a place where the living relinquish their awareness in death. And this description of Hel is essentially exactly the same as the Castañeda's image of the eagle. Moving on, we might as well have a look at the other wells associated with the roots of the world tree. The world tree being, of course, an image of the universe. Replacing the well of Hel and its running rivers, we may look at the well of memory that is the Mimisbrunner. The name translates as the well of Mimir, known as a giant friend of Odin, but whose name should be taken seriously, because his name means the rememberer, the memory. According to Snorri, this well of Mimir, this well of memory, contains all the tidings of the world, all the knowledge of the world. That is, it contains the descriptions, the memories, the experiences of the entire world and all the beings that live in it. Mimir, the memory giant, drinks from this well every day through the resounding horn, the Jallarhorn, the bellowing horn that he shares with Heimdallr, the great world, so that Mimir may be compared to Suttungur, whose name means heavy with drink. Now, the drinking of cosmic memories seems to me to be yet another image of a cosmic source that devours the awareness of the universe after lived lives. It is obviously a place where the memory of universal awareness is stored. But does it also transmit something akin to the wind-like, wave-like, or river-like emanations of the eagle? Indeed, if you look closely at this myth, you will realize that the giant Mimir, that is, the memory of the universe, drinks from the well of memory, much like the eagle feeds on awareness. And he drinks through a horn called Hjallarhorn, the bellowing or the resounding horn. And the drinking horn not only associates the well of memory with the well of hell, the well of death, through the bellower, the Hjallarhjöll theme, but also with the god Heimdallr, whose name means the great, dazzling, awesome world, and who, rather than drinking from the horn, blows out through the bellower horn, the Hjallarhorn. Whenever he blows through it, whenever there is a meeting between dimensions, different dimensions meeting, that's when he blows through the bellowing horn. And what is he blowing out? Sound, obviously. Sound imbued with the memories of the world. As I've said before, Heimdallr, the great world who hears all and sees all, is in some way identical or resembling Mead, who remembers all, and they are linked through their shared property, the bellowing horn, the Hjallarhorn. What went into the well of memory comes out in the shape of sound, a kind of vibration essential to creation. We are seeing the same theme of the cosmic source again and again and again in Norse myths. Let's move on to another theme of cosmic source. The third well of the world tree, the one situated in the heart of Åsgarder, the realm of the gods. This is the Urdarbrunnr, the well of origin. And the well is owned by the Norn Urdur, whose name means origin, or beginning, or before. I like to use the translation origin, it sounds best, but it could mean before or beginning too. The past, basically. She is the oldest of the Norns, of the Fates, and she is the most powerful being in the cosmos. The Norns are the most powerful beings in the cosmos, since they create all cosmic laws and all destiny. And they created the runes of destiny that Odin discovered and made known. He looked down when he hung on the world tree. He looked down and then, screaming, he picked the runes up. Runes are ultimately about fate and cosmic laws. Anyway, the well of origin is the water from which the universe, symbolized by the world tree, is nourished. The old lady herself goes out every day to water the tree from her well. The water of the well replenishes, rejuvenates and heals the world tree. It also has the quality, says Snorri, that if a person bathes, take a bath in that water, he or she or it will be transformed and emerge from the well like a transparent, bright and ethereal being. This water is also from where all the Norns, the fate goddesses, emerge. All the fates come out of the well of origin. And what are they? Well, they are the fates of the individual human beings. And at the birth of a human being, one fate, one Norn, will ascend from the well of origin in order to shape the fate of the newly born. We all have one throughout life. And she will follow her human throughout their life, continually spinning away or carving runes, basically shaping the life as the Norns did unto death. And then, we must assume, she will return to the source of origin in order to be renewed before a new birth. And what does the Norn have to do with awareness, memories, and the river-like, wind-like emanations from the source? everything. What is fate but the story of life? The fate of a person is the story of that person. The fate of a society is the story of that society. The Norn, the fate goddess of each person, tells your story and holds your story in her hands. It will remind us of Odin's wife, Frigg, a goddess who knows all fate, and who also goes by another name, Saga, which means the story. I have earlier claimed that the wives of the Aesir often seem to represent their personal fates, and Frigg is Odin's fate, Odin's story. So once again, we find an interesting parallel to the eagle's emanations. The emanations carry awareness out into the universe from the cosmic source. That is their purpose. And the emanations also carry the echoes, the memories of experience back to the source. In the same way, the Norns emerge from and later return to the well of origin, carrying these stories, the experiences of lived lives, that part of our lives which require awareness, perception. So, may the Norns somehow truly be identical to the emanations, to the rivers, to the winds, to the waves of the universe? Well, let us look a bit closer at these ladies who follow each of us through life according to Norse beliefs. First of all, the concept of the spinning or the weaving Norns is significant. In pagan times, women would use the rhythmic and repetitive movements of spinning and weaving to enter trance and to have visions about fate, which is probably why the Norns are described as spinning and weaving the threads of fate. But let us stop and consider these threads of fate. Each thread, obviously, is a story, a life story. In a weave, the story interacts with other stories. At birth, the Norns would apparently arrive and start casting the stories, the threads of fate, around to begin the weave of life. In Castaneda's descriptions, the emanations of the eagle are often described as fibers or filaments moving through the universe. And I wonder if the fibers of the weave of the Norns may be yet another image describing the emanations of awareness. The fate goddesses of the individual men or women resemble, in the way that they are described and named, a part of the human soul. That is what I think, anyway. Sometimes the Norn is called a spådis, which means a prophetic goddess. That is, when she appears to her person with advice and guidance or warnings. Sometimes she is called a fylgja, a follower, and operates a bit like a sort of guardian spirit to her human. Or she may be called a dis, which just means a goddess, or a haminga, which originally probably meant a shape or hide walker, someone moving inside a hamur, supernatural animating power of a shape. And then she may turn out to be a Valkyria or simply be called a Norn. She is not only responsible for spinning the life, but also to choose a death and to carry the dead back into hell or into Valhall or Folkvanger, or any other place that you might go in death. There are apparently a lot of different options. It was thought that a person could have 1, 3, 9, or 2 by 3, or 3 by 9 Norns in their following. The many would usually be just silent attachments to one leading Norn. The personal fate or fates could be of different kinds. What kind of fate goddess you had would show through the fortune or the lack of fortune in your life. Most people have sleeping fates, the daughters of Dvalin, which means hibernation. So they are the daughters of hibernation. And if your fate goddess was sleeping, a daughter of hibernation, then your life would be randomly spun and easily unfortunate. Other people have divine fates, like the heroes of the Edda, who woke up their fate during a trial of initiation to find that they were powerful Valkyrier, who would lead her person to honor and glory, and even save you from hell and dark hell. We have stories where the Valkyria goes into dark hell to save her lover from the dark ogress of hell. So representing a different kind of fate after death. And other people had elfin fates, akin to the light elves, who were immortal and who lived in the upper heavens. Through my studies over a long time, I have come to believe that the often recurrent Norse theme of waking up a giantess, goddess, or Valkyria who resides in a hidden but glorious realm in the underworld, in the world of the dead, has to do with a path that is all about waking up your personal fate goddess. And when the fate, the Norn, is woken up and released from her slumber in the metaphorical underworld, then she becomes an important part of the hero's life. His life becomes rich in wisdom and power, and he is able to gain control over his destiny. I have talked about this and written a lot about this. So I will just move on to draw the connection between the fates that emerge from the well of origin and the so-called emanations, the rivers, the waves or the winds that emerge from the cosmic source in so many different mythical versions. Just a moment. We have mentioned the parallel between the Norn and the emanation when it comes to creating and carrying the life stories from a source and returning it to the same source. Like the emanations, the Norns emerge from the cosmic source, the well of origin, Urdarbrunner. Like the emanations, they are closely linked to both awareness and death. We have also mentioned the possibility of the thread and the weave as images of fate, as actually also being an image of the emanations of life. Are there any other aspects that link the Norns with the rivers, the waves, and the streams of universal awareness and experience, the stories woven through existence? Because all these rivers, waves, and streams stem from a common source. Well, there is a stanza in the poetic Edda, the Vafthrudnismål, the speech of the powerful head whale, where the Hamingur, another name for the follower Norns, are compared with great rivers flooding the world. And I quote from Vafthrudnismål, stanza 48 and 49. Odin kvað, fjöldek for, fjöldek freistadak, fjöldek röjnda regin. Verjar och der möjar lida mar yfir, frodgeðjar fara. Odin said, much did I travel, much did I try, much did I test the powers. Who are the maidens streaming as one? Again, verjar och der möjar lida mar yfir. Who are the maidens streaming as one across the ocean, exceedingly wise as they travel. Frúðgetjaðar fara. They are very, very wise, very aware. That is Odin's question, and then Vafthrudnir replies. Vafthrudnir hvað? Þríar tjóðar falla þorp yfir, mauja mög þrasis. Hamingjur einar veri heimi eru, þó þeir með jötnum alast, menn han sjálfam sjó. Well, the powerful head whale replied, 3 great rivers fall across the world, and they belong to the kin trackers' maidens. They are all hamingjur, they are all shape walkers. When they are in the world, although they were born among the Jötnar, the giants, even if man never see him. Let's move back to this. So 3 great rivers fall across the world, and they belong to the kin trackers' maidens. And these maidens that own the rivers that fall across the world, these maidens are called hamingjur, shape walkers. And they are called hamingjur when they are in the world of human beings, although they were born among the Jötnar, the giants. And the fact that the Norns are here described as streaming across the ocean, and that they are compared to great rivers, or as the owners of great rivers that are streaming through the whole world, which is the home of the kin trackers' maidens. That is a metaphor for the world itself. Well, this makes us once again think about the emanations flowing through the universe. It is also said that these maidens, who are shape walkers and kin trackers' maidens and the owners of the great rivers of the world, well, it is said that they are also born among giants, which is a claim that is confirmed many times in the sources. It appears that the Norns began as giantesses. So let us take a little detour into the realm of the giants. In the realm of the giants, we find yet another image of the same cosmic source of awareness. We find that there is a sort of ocean, a cosmic ocean, I believe, in which the giantess Ran receives the dead who have drowned at sea. Now this could be, as most people think, a sort of ocean goddess, but she is clearly also a death goddess. And in poetry she is described exactly the same way as Hel is described, because in skaldic poetry, Hel is not described in the way that Snorri described during the early 13th century, 1200. She is described in older sources, the poetry, as an attractive and beautiful woman who invites people to party and to make love. And her embrace is, however, death. Yes, if what I just said surprised you, it is probably because you have been reading Snorri's version of Hel as a very grim-looking, poor, outcast girl. However, his description is a late one and does not correspond with earlier descriptions from sources of Norse poetry. As said, Hel is a real beauty according to some poems, and so is Ran, although they are also terrifying and very menacing. However, returning to Ran, the queen of the ocean, an alluring woman who awaits the drowned with her net. The fact that the ocean in itself is a poetic image of the realm of death is itself not so strange. During the Viking Age, death at sea or death by drowning was extremely common. And so the ocean becomes an earthly version of the cosmic ocean, in which there is an ancient entity who attracts and who claims the dead. It is the same image all over again, and Ran's net, with which she catches the dead, is yet another image of the weave of life, made out of countless different threads of fate. Now this Ran has a husband called Ægir, whom I have earlier identified with the other-world giants such as Sutungr, Heimdallr, Ymir, and so on. Ægir lives on an island called Helesøy, which means the wind-shielded island. Knowing that wind equals death and that it equals the emanations of awareness, we realize that Ægir lives in a place that is shielded from these forces. So I call it the island of immortality, shielded from the winds of death. But it might just as well be identical to the grove, the well, the source from which every sentient life and movement stems. Now the couple, Ran and Ægir, at the end of the world in the cosmic ocean, well, they have 9 daughters, and interestingly enough, these daughters are identified as waves and rivers. So they are also called rivers, and they are called not only rivers and waves, but they are also called the lights of the gods. Their father is said to be steering the winds and the waves. And in one Edda poem, the Oddrunar Gråter, we learn that the daughters who emerge from the island called Helesøy, the windshield island, the island of immortality, well, they are in fact Valkyrier. That is, they are fate goddesses. In several other places, we learn that 9 sorceresses, 9 giantesses, gave birth to this world at the end of heaven, which is the exact same location as the Great Eagle. Thus we learn something interesting. The mothers of the world are giantesses and fate goddesses who emerged from the realm of death as daughters of the primeval cosmic couple. The male in that couple stands in the ship harbour of his shielded island or grove of immortality, steering the winds and the waves, his daughters. The female of the couple waits with her net as the daughters, the waves, the winds, bring back the dead, and she receives the results, the remnants of the dead, taking them into her net and, we suspect, devour them. However, just as she receives the dead, she also gives birth to the daughters, the rivers, the waves that create fate, that create life stories, that birth the world into being. So once more we have the same essential description of a cosmic source of awareness, a source of fate and life stories, which also receives the memories of the dead. People get easily hung up in geographical borders and individual characters when they try to understand myth. Look beyond all that and into the essence of what is being conveyed here, and you realize that there is no difference between the 3 wells or at the 3 roots of the world tree. There is no difference between these wells and the image of the eagle or the image of the Ægir and Ran. It is the same story told over and over again, using new imagery and new names every time, which is to follow the rules of Old Norse poetry, the basic rules. Describe one thing in a countless diverse ways. So you have the well of origin, and you have fate, from which the fate comes, the well of origin and fate. You have the well of Hel and death, from which the rivers come, and you have the well of memory, from which intelligence and sound vibrations come, and which they return to. And you have the Mead of poetry, from where knowledge comes. And you have the cosmic ocean death realm, from which the mothers of the world emerge in the shape of rivers, waves, or light. And you have the story of Ymir, that great cosmic voice or sound, whose body was divided into countless tunes. And then you have the eagle, from which the winds of consciousness emanate. All these different descriptions do not describe different geographical areas. They are all using different images describing the same awesome phenomenon, the cosmic source, which is essentially exactly the same as that described by Castaneda in his book The Fire from Within, the eagle and its emanations of awareness. And the reason why these two are so similar doesn't mean that there was any cultural or historical connections. It could mean that human beings from different parts of the world have perceived the same deeper reality behind reality, and that they were describing it with their own cultural terms, on their own cultural premises, but really they are describing the same essential thing. And that's why I think there are so many similarities. They are actually describing different cultures, describing the same mysterious but actual thing. So what is the point of knowing all this? Why were Norse poets so obsessed with describing this cosmic source over and over again in various ways? Well, I will look back on Castaneda again in order to offer a very possible clue. So now I'm going to use my own words in order to summarize and simplify the explanations given, because Castaneda also, like the Norse skalds, uses a lot of terms that are only understandable to those who have seriously studied his work. So to explain it in simpler terms, a human being is, according to Don Juan, ultimately an energy being. We normally only perceive the physical reality of our bodies. But beyond that physical reality, there is a greater reality where we are pure energy. This energy is made up of threads, so-called threads or fibers or filaments of the cosmic emanations. The human energy body is like a cocoon made up of such fibers, such invisible but very real filaments of fibers. However, the ordinary human being will not make any use whatsoever of most of these fibers that we consist of. When a seer looks at the energy cocoon of a human being, the seer will observe that most of the cocoon is dimmed and only a small part lit up. That tiny light is our conscious awareness, but it only illuminates a very small part of oneself. We have a kind of glow of awareness that is normally restricted to only move within a very small part of the entire energy body. This is the reason why we hold on to a particular perception of the world and ourselves. But this perception is only a very, very tiny portion of all that we really are. Our awareness only glows, only lights up a very small part of our real, true selves. The seer, according to Don Juan, is a person who learns to expand this glow of awareness until this glow of awareness covers the entire energy body, so that we illuminate every part of ourselves and become whole beings. When the glow of awareness has expanded to the entire energy body, then we light up like a fire from within. And this is what is called the fire from within, as in Castaneda's book. This one here, the fire from within. So when this glow of awareness has lit up the entire energy body, not just the small part that we use to function in everyday human social life, but in order to actually be the fullness, the wholeness of ourselves, which is infinitely much greater. Well, this is to become aware of the entirety, the wholeness of ourselves. And when the seer has succeeded in lighting the fire from within, then the seer becomes free also of the devouring beak of the eagle. At death, the seer will be able to maintain their awareness, not to give it in to the beak of the eagle, but to maintain their own awareness, so as not to become consumed into that great cosmic pool of memories. So basically, when we die, most of us are going to go, well, all of our awareness, what's left of ourselves, will go into the great, huge hole, the source from which everything stems. It goes back there, becomes part of the well of memory there, but losing our individuality. But it is actually possible to maintain, if you learn how to make your entire energy body start to glow with a fire from within, then you will be able to maintain your awareness and actually sort of gain a sort of immortality, free from the devouring beak of the source. So yeah, to maintain awareness is to maintain one's life on an energy level. At death, the seer will be able to maintain their awareness so as not to become consumed into that great cosmic pool of memories. To maintain awareness is to maintain one's life on an energy level. It is a way to achieve individual freedom and immortality. And to achieve this result is the reason why the old seers wanted to learn about the eagle and its emanations in the first place. Now, to Norse mythology, there are countless stories of such feats, but I will concentrate mainly on the eagle stories here. As far as I remember, there are at least 3 stories of how the eagle is killed, metaphorically. And they all of these stories of killing the eagle involve the rescue or the guidance of a bright maiden. So firstly, there is the story I mentioned earlier about how the hero succeeded in rescuing the maidens from the giant in eagle disguise while in the land of falling asleep. And significantly, there is a fire involved. The house that the maidens are kept inside of and that the eagle is guarding, it's on fire, and so is the whole land when this happens. When Sinfjotli goes, when Atle goes in to the land of the sleeping, then their whole country is afire. And this is when he kills the eagle and rescues the maidens. Secondly, you have the story of how Loki rescued the goddess Idun from the giant in eagle disguise in the land of the drum. And the eagle, Thrymheim, the drumming one, the land of the drumming one. And there, the eagle, Chatsi, the eagle Chatsi, the slave binder, pursued Loki and the goddess Idun, who is the goddess of eternal life, but lost when the gods set a great fire up in their realm. And in a third story, Odin rescues the mead of poetry given to him by the maiden Hyndluljóð, who also aids him in his escape from her father. Her father pursues Odin in his eagle disguise, but Odin escapes while also wearing an eagle disguise. He takes upon himself the same disguise as the great giant of the source. So you can ponder that meaning yourself. And what happens when he reaches the divine realm of the gods? Well, he flies right through the great fire that the gods had put up, and the slave binder he burns up. And then, in this way, the precious mead is brought back into the realm of the gods and into the shrines of earth. And the result is that Odin is able to come among the binding powers that is among the immortal gods, and he becomes the god of wisdom and learning that he remained ever after. So who or what is being rescued in these stories? Basically, it is Mead, or a maiden, or both. The mead of poetry is the mead that contains all the knowledge, all the memory. It is indeed often called the mead of memory, minnesdrycker. And the poetry that creates the stories of the lives. I suppose we could call that awareness. And when it comes to the goddess Idun, we know that she is the power that rejuvenates the gods every day, just like Urdur, the oldest known origin, is what rejuvenates the world tree. Significantly, the name Idun means something like a woman who returns to the water source, the one who creates an eddy when she tries to return to the source. And she is described also as the seed of the world tree, the seed of Yggdrasill, Yggdrasill's frå. As I have mentioned earlier, this is where the title of my book comes from a kenning for the goddess Idun as Yggdrasill's frå, the seed of Yggdrasill. Which means that she is both the seed to the new one and a product of the old one. Now, so she returns to a water source, and she is described as the seed of the world tree, and she is described as Åsa Leika, which means the single lover of all the gods. And she is the oldest and the youngest child of Ivaldi, the inner ruler. And she is clearly connected to life and to life force. And she is called Dis Forvitin, which means that she is the knowledge-hungry goddess. And it is her hunger for knowledge that will make us able to draw the connection between this goddess and awareness. Awareness that is so essential for maintaining life. So in the Edda there are many stories and references to the golden lady that may be found in the world of the dead, and that by uniting with her or drinking her mead, one will not only be able to access hidden knowledge, but also to escape death. The golden lady is strongly associated with fate and with knowledge, especially the fate of death. And if she is ultimately a metaphor for the emanations of awareness that stream from the cosmic source of life and death, then the idea that she has to be woken up in order to reveal the hidden knowledge of personal power and immortality that is always being described in the Edda as our human heritage, then this concept is exactly the same found in the idea of lighting the fire of awareness until it covers the entirety of our being, just like when Thor had to find a cauldron that covered his entire body. And that was the only cauldron that was big enough to contain all the mead that was served at Hellesøy. where the Norns, where the daughters of Ægir were functioning as lights, and where this island is also called Hleesøy, the wind-shielded island, the death-shielded island. So, in my opinion, what is being described as a path towards knowledge and immortality, akin to that described by Castaneda, where the whole point is to reach the totality of oneself and to claim one's own fate. The Norse version of the fire from within is perhaps best described in the Völuspá story of the witch called Gullveigr, golden drink, another name perhaps for Freya. And in that story, the divine witch displays her immortality by bursting into flames 3 times, bursting into fire 3 times, emerging unscathed, and thus instigating the path of freedom from being consumed in death. She conquers death by illuminating herself on fire. So, that was it for today. I'm sorry about the cat interruption. I think I'll have to go and give her some treats now. And thank you for listening. We have only 1 chapter left now, and I will finish that next time. Thank you.